Awesome.
How's it going? Congratulations.
Thank you so much, Corey. Thank you. First of all, thank you, Ovik, and thank you to the whole Free Up organization. I'm really deeply honored and really sit here representing dozens and dozens of others who have long fought for education freedom, which is what I prefer to call school choice education freedom.
Yeah, it's an honor to be up here with you, to interview you. We actually did something like this a couple years ago, I think, at something called Freedom Fest. But yeah, thank you so much, Ovik, for having us out. Thanks, Free Up, for honoring Betsy with this fantastic award. How's everybody doing? You know, I gotta say, and Ovik kind of hinted at this a second ago, but look, we're winning so much, I'm almost getting tired of winning when it comes to school.
I'm not, Corey.
No, we're not done yet. We're not done yet. But
I'm not getting tired of it.
I wanted to open up by asking you, what's changed? I mean, we've been fighting for this for a long time, for decades, trying to get incremental school choice done or education freedom. What has led to this huge revolution we've seen unfold over the past few years?
Well, I think it was a pandemic that really brought into focus for many, many families who previously had not given a thought to the quality or experience their children were having in their schools. And parents suddenly had a firsthand look at what was happening, whether it was in the kitchen or in the living room, a Zoom screen or whatever method they were trying to use for some distance learning. When it was the in school again, out of school, locking kids out, masks, no masks. And then it was also seeing the curriculum that their children were being fed. And in many cases, it was a lack of expectation and robustness. In other cases, it was an absolute antithetical teaching to the family's values on a variety of fronts. And so I think it was really any of those experiences and those realities really brought into focus for parents in a new way. Particularly middle income and upper middle income families, because for many years, those of us who have been laboring to get policy passed, we've been focusing, rightfully so, on the families that can least afford to make those choices. But this brought a whole nother host of folks into the equation in ways they had not been before, and that, I believe, has been the real difference.
So wait, you're telling me we should present a different type of award to Randy Weingarten for overplaying her hand?
It was interesting. In May of 2020, just a couple of years into the whole COVID situation, we were in my office in the Department of Education and talking about the latest antic of Randy and all of her cronies. And I said, mark my words, the teachers' unions are going to overplay their hands in this whole thing, and it's ultimately going to play to our benefit, as horrible as this all is. And I guess it was a little prescient because she keeps doubling down, even today, on doing things that just feed into the support for empowering parents and funding students directly.
So what are some examples, or one of your biggest examples of how they overplayed their hand, or some of the ridiculous things they've done over the past few years?
Well, I think the fact that they've had a direct pipeline to the CDC and editing the guidelines that were being promulgated from there, and just the continued insistence on deciding when and how and where kids were going to go back to school, when in the urban areas that could least afford to be locked down and shut out for months and years were the ones hardest hit, and those are the kids that have suffered the most, and those are the parents who are ultimately going to benefit from the greater number of parents now engaged in advocating for these policy changes and these opportunities for their own children. But I mean, at every step, they do and say things that it's just jaw-dropping. because I think they just live in such a world unto themselves. They don't really know and understand what's going on in the real world. And just a little example of this, my first day in office, I called both Randy Weingarten and then the NEA president at the time, Lily Eskelsen Garcia, to say, I know we disagree on many things, but I'm sure we can find some common ground, and to, really try to get together with each of them and talk about ways we could help students. To her credit, Randy took the call, and we agreed to visit. I agreed to visit a school of her choosing, and she agreed to visit a school of my choosing. I followed through and visited a school with her. She never seemed to be able to schedule a visit to a school that I chose, but it was interesting. And Lily said publicly she would never speak to me and she would never meet with me. So the very first day they really laid their cards on the table that they're not about students and doing the right thing for kids. They're all about power, control, systems, and the people that they ultimately work with, and the cabal that is part of their whole organization.
Yeah, so look, what's interesting is a lot of times people confuse teachers' unions with groups that support teachers and actually benefit teachers. Do you have any thoughts on how school choice could not only benefit students and families, but teachers in the profession as well?
Well, I think education freedom is a great opportunity for teachers, and I think about the high percentage of teachers that have taken themselves off the playing field and to the sidelines because they're either so frustrated with the system in which they have to work, or they're really appalled by the things they're being forced to teach. And I've personally spoken with a number of teachers who have retired early because they just can't stand to do as they've been told they have to do. I believe for those teachers and many, many more future aspiring teachers, the opportunity to have the freedom to find an education environment that works for you as a teacher is as attractive as it is for parents who want that same thing for their children. And I think about the many different, so I visited as many different kinds of schools and education situations as I could that were doing things differently and sort of thinking outside of the box. But those visits and those experiences really only scratch the surface of what I think can be the case for kids in their K-12 education years, a dozen years from now, with robust education freedom policies, because you unleash the entrepreneurial creative spirit around education like it's been unleashed in other areas in our country. And I think we can only begin, we can't even begin to imagine how many different kinds of experiences kids will have. And I have to give a little plug to my husband who's here with me tonight, Dick, who started, he started a dozen years ago, he started a charter high school in Michigan, because charters are the extent of the choice we have currently in Michigan. But the high school he started, he's a pilot, loves flying, and we've both been involved in education reform for many years. So he married those two ideas and has started an aviation high school that is, it's oriented around aviation. So these kids come, they get great education, but it's around a theme or a convening idea. And you think about how many different areas, and how many different professions, how many different vocations you can theme schools around and experiences around. And we can only begin to sort of scratch the surface of the ideas that I think will start coming online for kids as parents are empowered with these choices.
I remember during the COVID era, there was a Washington Post article where they were outlining a public school teacher in New Jersey left the system after decades and started a micro school. Mm-hmm. And so they were saying that she had the same pay, smaller class size, more autonomy. So they didn't take the next step though and say this is why we should have ESAs and fund students directly to get it more directly to the teacher from the family. But I think, and it seems like we're seeing Milton Friedman's idea of universal school choice coming to fruition. And he had a great quote. He had a lot of great quotes, actually. And he was actually on my screensaver for about almost a decade until...
But Miriam is now, right?
That picture was replaced by someone more beautiful, Miranda, who's here today. Thank you for being here. But his quote was, you don't change things by putting the right people into office. The way that you truly change things is by creating a climate of public opinion where it becomes politically profitable for the wrong people to do the right thing. So would you say some of the change in school choice policy or education freedom being unleashed has to do with political calculations? Is it becoming more of a political winner? Are voters paying more attention?
Absolutely. It's become a clear political winner. And we can attribute a lot of the policy victories in the last 18 months to the fact that finally, even in the reddest of red states, Republicans, legislators have realized that this is a winning issue. This is a winning issue amongst Democrats, Independents, and Republicans. And it's not going to be too long until more and more Democrats are going to realize that they have to leave the unions behind and really join up with parents on this issue. Because it is a winning issue everywhere. And while the states there aren't that many states yet that have Democrat-led chambers and governor's office. North Carolina and Illinois, even though that's under attack, and of course Pennsylvania is on the cusp, and I think Governor Shapiro there is trying to figure out a way to do the right thing and to come through on his commitment. But the reality is this is a winning issue when it's over 70%, no matter how you cut it. Eventually the politicians are going to have to get on board with that.
And we should obviously mention Governor Doug Ducey, who's in the audience right now, who'll be up on next to receive the award as well. One of the first states to go universal, the first state to go truly universal with no budgetary caps. His state had 1-seat GOP majorities in each chamber, and they were able to get it done. But you know what? I live in Texas, and we're still fighting special sessions right now. Passed through the Senate. There's a holdup in the House. They have more of a GOP majority in Texas than in Arizona. What do you think is the reason for Texas lagging on this issue? Why haven't we gotten it done yet? Similarly, in other red states, we haven't expanded it to every red state. And then the second part of the question is, how do we ultimately get this to all Americans in red states and blue states alike?
Well, in Texas and in other states, it comes down to a lot of the rural legislators, in some cases suburban legislators, that are very beholden to the system. They're friends with the superintendents. They're afraid of the ramifications, but they do that at their peril today because, Kim Reynolds in Iowa, after having been thwarted by those same type of Republicans for her first term, was very clear. She endorsed 9 challengers to state legislators in the last election, and with the help of an organization that Corey works with today, with the help of others to bring highlight to that in the primaries. 8 of the 9 challengers won, and the 9th one on the day after said, "Okay, I'm going to be with you, Governor," and that's going to happen in Texas if these legislators don't do the right thing and vote to support their constituents who are very much in this camp. But it does take the political muscle, and that is, I think, when you trace back to where the policies around education freedom really started to make some headway. COVID, of course, accelerated it, but it made headway when we combined the politics and putting the political muscle and going head to head with the teachers' unions in state legislative races, and winning, frankly. that was really the turning point, because debating it on the emotional and or logical merits, it only won over a limited number of people, but it's the political muscle that makes the difference.
Yeah, politicians often respond to power more so than logic, unfortunately. Not the ones in the room, obviously. They respond to the logic and morality. But look, one of the jokes from Iowa was that the union-owned politician should have just passed Reynolds' original bill because it was limited to a few thousand students, cleaned up house, and they got full-throated universal school choice this year.
Well, and that's the point with the AFT and NEA with Weingarten and Becky Pringle. I think they are so tone deaf to what's really going on. I just don't. All of these things are happening, but I don't think they fully understand the long-term ramifications for their situation, which is good, because meanwhile we'll continue to help make sure that more policies get adopted and more families get freed to make those decisions for their kids.
So we have a new Speaker of the U.S. House, Mike Johnson. He's a co-sponsor on the Educational Choice for Children Act, which is a federal school choice program. Could you talk a little bit more about how you pushed for education freedom scholarships when you were at the department, and how this could unleash school choice across the nation?
Absolutely. Well, while we were in office, we presented and had sponsored in both chambers a bill that would establish a federal tax credit that could be adopted or could be accepted by any of the 50 states, any and all of the 50 states, to basically allow individuals and corporations to designate a small percentage of their federal tax bill into a scholarship granting organization to directly benefit families. And the bill today is slightly different than the one that we had introduced, but it is same idea, and it's gotten more support today than any education freedom bill has previously. And Chairman Smith, head of Ways and Means, had a hearing week before last, I think it was. So there's lots of good momentum around it at the federal level as well.
I was on that hearing as a witness.
That's right, you were.
Okay.
Great job.
Thank you.
So it's making some really, really good headway, and I think again will be a very important issue in this cycle. Education has popped up on the screen in ways that it has not before, and I attribute much of that attention to the horrors that were wrought by how COVID was navigated by the system. And revealing to people like never before how it has failed so many kids. The test scores, all of the test scores, from before and after COVID plummeting, but those scores were going down from well before COVID. And I've often said the Department of Education was not founded until 1979. It was a payoff to the teachers' unions that Jimmy Carter made after they endorsed him for president, the first time a teachers union had endorsed a presidential candidate. And I just wish that Ronald Reagan had followed through on his commitment to disband the department in 1981 when he got to office, because it could have happened then. But over $1 trillion later at the federal level to close achievement gaps, express purpose, and not only have they not closed one little bit, they've actually widened by most measures. So you have to ask yourself, why do we keep doing the same thing with more and more and more taxpayer dollars and expect different results? I believe that the momentum at the state level and now at the federal level has a chance to really reverse that trend.
So you've given us a little history on the U.S. Department of Education, which shouldn't exist. The word education is not in the U.S. Constitution. I'm with you on that. What about, you have a new book, a pretty recent book that came out called Hostages No More. What's the history behind the name of your book, or just the reason that you decided to call it Hostages No More?
Hostages No More, the fight for education, freedom, and the future of the American child. So the Hostages No More was meant to be sort of provocative. but it is a reference to a quote made by Horace Mann, known as the father of our K-12 education system, who over 175 years ago said that educators are entitled to look upon parents as having given hostages to our cause. And I think that the COVID experience made parents realize just how many ways their children have been held hostage. And so it really is a playbook for parents and also legislators on how we can change that trend and really put parents back in charge of their kids' education as they should be.
What is your argument you've heard from the teachers unions against education freedom that is just total bogus in your view? And one of the things that you've thought, why are they even saying this?
Well, they use all the same worn-out arguments about harming public schools, taking funding from public schools. First of all, schools aren't meant to be funded. Kids are meant to be funded. And the reality is, and also they use the argument that only parents that actually care about their kids and are smart enough to figure things out will take advantage of this, which I think is the most patronizing and awful thing that can be said about parents anywhere. I've met hundreds of parents, of low-income parents, who love their kids to death, and they want the best for their kids, and they want to be able to have their kids have a good education, and they will fight to the end to do that. And it is so offensive to me to hear that argument that, poor parents can't figure this out. They also, talk about harming the public system. Well, first of all, the public system for millions of kids is a failure. It's not working. And when you look at places like Florida that have had education freedom policies in place, albeit growing slowly over the years, but when you look at the districts in Florida where the highest percentage of students are going to a school other than their assigned school, so it might be another public school in their district, it might be a charter school, it might be a private or a home school, any kind of school other than their assigned school. When you look at the outcomes and the achievement levels in those districts where that highest percentage of kids are elsewhere, they're better because everyone's getting better. And there was just another study out. I didn't get into the details of it, or wasn't able to get into the details of it today. It still doesn't go to answer the question of why the traditional public schools get better, but it continues to affirm the fact that the achievement levels for kids in those schools have continued to improve. So you can't tell me that giving parents that freedom of choice and opportunity is going to harm public schools, because it doesn't. Right. And it only makes things ultimately better. Competition makes everything better. School
choice is a rising tide that lifts all boats. I believe that was a study that just came out in American Economic Journal by the by David Figlio and his research team. And we've had 29 studies now on this topic, 26 of them positive. It's so clear. And it's the main argument from the other side. It's going to hurt the public schools. No, it's actually going to do the opposite.
It actually helps.
What do you think are the next steps? What are the next states that we're looking at that are on your radar at least? Where do you think things are going from here?
Well, I think it's there's lots of opportunities. I think Louisiana, Mississippi. Yep. I think there's going to Tennessee is looking at expansion. There's any state that has even a small program is seriously looking at dramatic expansion. But the reality is it's going to continue to be a fight. It's going to continue. Governor Ducey and I were talking earlier this evening about Arizona it's going to continue to be a fight there, because the other side is not going to give up. They are not going to give up easily. And so it's in all of our interests to make sure that when families are empowered and kids have these chances, that we also encourage their engagement to make sure that none of this gets rolled back, and in fact, it continues to expand.
That's right, and there was some news out of Arizona today. 70,000 kids enrolled in their expanded school choice program. It jumped from about 10,000 last year since Governor Ducey helped expand that. It's gone from 10,000 to about 70,000 kids today enrolled in that program.
And 3 times the number in Ohio since they've expanded there. And I think more than double in Indiana. I mean, the demand is there, and the demand is going to continue to drive innovation and creativity around the experiences, and it's going to all accrue to the benefit of kids and ultimately to our country's future, because we're going to have kids better prepared to be adults and take their place in society as prepared and responsible adults.
You mentioned Florida, and I think there's an important debate going on in Florida pretty soon. So the presidential debates, how do you think this is unfolding at the presidential level from what you're seeing relative to prior times? Are the candidates talking about it more,
Absolutely,
less?
Absolutely, and it's been very heartening and encouraging to hear every Republican candidate talk about education and education freedom as being very important on their platform of ideas to promote, and so that's all to the good.
Absolutely. So this has been a great conversation. Everybody get Hostages No More. It's a recently came out book, and so as far as, I want to go back though, before we rush off the stage, back to the past couple of years and kind of the inner workings of the victories and COVID kind of playing into that. Some legislatures have gone and done like bans on CRT, for example, or other types of ideology. What is your take on those kinds of bills, and how does that interplay with the school choice conversation?
Well, look, I understand legislatures wanting to address some of these really thorny issues, but I think the better way to address some of these things is to give families the freedom to choose another place for their children to learn. If they're unhappy with the curriculum that is being presented in their assigned school, they should have the freedom to take the money already expended on that child and choose any other school that's going to work for that child. And I think that's ultimately the best way to tackle these issues. Because every time you try to ban something in some way, it's going to pop up somewhere in a different form or version. And the same thing with a mandated curriculum. There's lots of folks who have advocated for federal curriculums, and I have always been an opponent of federal curriculum, because even the best intended effort around a federal curriculum, let's take civics, for example, it's ultimately several years down the road. It might take 10 or 20 years, but it's ultimately going to end up something totally different than what it was originally intended. And so the best, just like FREOP advocates, freedom and opportunity is going to drive the best kind of options and results. And that's what I'm an advocate for.
Absolutely. And while you were at the U.S. Department of Education as secretary, what was the moment that made you feel most proud of, or biggest accomplishment, you'd say?
Well, there were a number of them. I think really focusing everything that we did on students and doing the right thing for students. And then that played out in a number of areas, whether it's continually highlighting and talking about the need to move to education freedom policies, or it's the work we did around Title IX to protect students of all stripes and to ensure that Title IX was honored as it should be, as a way for both males and females to have equal access and opportunity to education. This current administration is trying to deep six everything that we've done and double down and go further than the Obama administration did on this. So that's very concerning, and I'm hopeful that there are folks in this room that will help make sure we push back against that. But yeah, I would say in continuing to push as much control and decision-making back to the state and local level, really respecting federalism, and doing absolutely everything within the law to push it back to the most local decision-making.
Absolutely, which are the parents and their kids who know best about what kind of educational needs they have and how to best meet those needs. Any final words of encouragement for the audience and what you want them to walk away with?
Well, again, I just am very grateful for this honor and the opportunity to be with you here today. And I know there are many in this room who are advocating right along with me for more and more education freedom. And I just want to encourage you to stay the course and really stick with the families and kids. They are our future. And I think we all can agree that there's nothing more important than making sure the rising generation gets prepared for that future. So thank you again, and thanks, Corey, for this opportunity.
Thank you.